Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast-o-matic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at an introduction and overview of the executive branch. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson, scroll down the correct section, and get ready to fill in the content that coincides with the fill-in-the-blank sections in the guided notes section. Please also get ready to answer any key concept questions that happen to appear throughout the notes accordingly. Please also remember that you can replay any part of this presentation for detailed clarity or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. This is an introduction and overview of the executive branch of the United States government. One of the first things to keep in mind here is that the details for the executive branch is technically outlaid in the Constitution of the United States. Article 2 of the Constitution describes the structure, roles, and powers of the executive branch. However, the role of the executive branch is to carry out executive or federal laws and defend the Constitution. Essentially, the executive branch enforces the laws of our country. Keep in mind that a president can come forth into office with a proposal or a series of proposals and provisions they'd like to see implemented, but they actually do not take any role in the lawmaking process. They can simply put pressure on Congress and, of course, affect the legislative process in that way, and take their case and agenda to the American people. But, of course, their main job is to essentially carry out and enforce the laws. Now, the President of the United States is the head of the executive branch. This tends to be common knowledge to most students, especially when they get to their 10th grade year in civics and government. However, there are several qualifications to be president. Here are just some of the few. So, there are only 3 presidential qualifications included in the Constitution that are specifically outlaid for us. The qualifications are the same for the vice president too, so that's worthy to keep in mind. You have to be native born to the United States of America, at least 35 years of age, and of course a 14-year resident of the United States of America. All 3 of these qualifications are very important. Now, there are also several unwritten rules too that the American people have had when it comes to picking a president. Generally speaking, some of these unwritten qualifications that are obviously not required but tend to be the pattern of American voting are white, married, male, with of course exceptions of like Grover Cleveland, who got married while being president, and James Buchanan, who remained unmarried and single during his entire term. And keep in mind, Barack Obama was the first African American president too. These general contours, however, show a general guidelines for how American people tend to gravitate towards certain candidates, traditionally speaking. Also Protestant, so Christian. Now, there's one exception here, of course. Catholicism for much of America's history was deemed to be rather controversial, so I believe we only had one Catholic president, and that was President John F. Kennedy. And of course, belongs to one of the 2 major political parties. In modern American times, we're either talking about Democrat or Republican. In terms of other unwritten qualifications, most Americans like to see some form of military capacity or serving in the military at some point in your life. Good public speaking skills, because this is essential not just in terms of talking to the American people or to the media, but also to foreign countries. This might sound trivial, but Americans tend to like their presidents taller than the average. 5'11" is the average height of U.S. presidents. The average American male is 5'9". And this might have something to do with how presidents appear on the international stage when compared to other worldly leaders. Generally speaking, too, Americans like to see their president be someone who's college educated and or somebody who has a law degree. For the most part, most of our presidents have gone to Ivy League institutions or colleges, and also has some previous experience in government. There is one notable exception, of course, to this, and that is former President Donald Trump, who was, by some accounts, to be deemed a businessman and or an entrepreneur or a real estate builder. Now, electing the president is also a somewhat convoluted and complicated process, but the electoral process is something we already learned about, so this should sound vaguely familiar. Citizens narrowed down the field of presidential candidates during primary elections, in the spring season before November's general election. You might remember that a few years ago, before we ended up with Joe Biden as the nominee, we actually had a very competitive field of Democrats who were vying for the Democratic nomination. Presidential candidates are formally nominated by their political parties at their national conventions in the summer before November's general election. So essentially, the political party conventions serve as not only pep rallies, but also as unifying efforts to bring the party together. Now, additionally, when it comes to electing the president, on Election Day, which is the Tuesday after the first Monday in November of the election year, citizens go to the polls to cast votes for a presidential candidate. Although they're actually, in theory, remember voting for a presidential elector who will then cast the official vote on behalf of you to the candidate. That system, of course, is called the Electoral College. Presidents are formally elected by the Electoral College in January after November's general election. And that period of time has actually been shortened. It used to be in March. But now, of course, with the invention and innovation and development of modern transportation and communication, new presidents are able to take over much sooner. Keep in mind the 12th Amendment is something to consider too when electing the president. Essentially ratified and upheld in 1804, this changed how elections cast votes for president and vice president. Instead of the winner becoming the president and the runner-up becoming vice president, the electors now cast separate votes for president and the vice president. This system makes sense because, if you think about it, it could be quite awkward and cumbersome as far as getting anything done if you were the president of one party and your arch-nemesis was the vice president of another party, and now you have to work together. This new current system seems to make more sense. Also, in terms of electing the President of the United States, let us consider the fact that presidents are sworn in or inaugurated when they take the oath of office on January 20th. Inauguration Day is a very important day for an incoming president, as they essentially set the tone for their new presidential administration and what they aim to get done. The 20th Amendment, signed and ratified in 1933, essentially allows this to be so. This changed the date of presidential and congressional terms from March to January, as stated before. This allows for the newer people in government to take the reins of office much sooner. Now, in terms of a president's term of office, let's talk about this. Presidents serve a 4-year term, but they are limited to 2 full terms of office by the 22nd Amendment in 1951. This is an important hallmark of our democracy, as no one person should be able to consolidate power for that long period of time. Keep in mind, it was Franklin Roosevelt who was the only president to serve more than 2 terms. And after he did die while in office, while World War II was still raging on, the American people were quick to act on this and implement this into law. Let's talk for a quick moment about a president's salary and benefits. Here are some things you might be surprised to know. The President of the United States earns an annual $400,000 a year. Health and dental care are included. $50,000 a year expense account is also included. A pretty good pension is also included too, plus money for post-presidential duties that one assumes to carry out. Entertainment and travel expenses are covered. And of course, you get to live in the White House, which is a 132-room mansion on an 18-acre estate. The White House is not only a huge ceremonial building, but of course it has a lot of functionality to it as well. And you'll understand this a little bit more later when you take a virtual tour of the White House. In terms of other salary and benefits, here they are. Camp David is able to be used at the disposal of the president, which is essentially a retreat center. Some presidents have used Camp David to bring foreign leaders together. The Blair House, which is the guest house located across from the White House. Many foreign dignitaries often stay there. Air Force One and other planes and helicopters, which of course are the main ways and means of aviation travel for the President of the United States. Also, Secret Service protection while the president is, of course, in office, and also for 10 years after. Presidents can also, of course, opt to take Secret Service coverage for a longer period of time if they so choose. Presidential limousine and other automobiles too, including the Beast, which is one of the most iconic presidential vehicles, which is well protected and armored, and even carries a sample of the president's blood too, just in case. And also, let's not forget about the many staff and assistants that are there to help the president, and also in doing so, helping the nation. So as you can see, those are some major things that involve and inculcate the presidency of the United States of America. When the time is right, into the next lesson, you may proceed to the next presentation on roles and powers of the president. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.